Okay, so let's go to chapter 32, which is when you think of occupational nursing, occupational health, what do you guys think about? What's occupational health?
Is that like the
People at work?
yeah, clinic at work or whatever?
Yeah, so the work environment, the work setting, right? So in previous weeks, we've talked about community health nurses being faith-based nurses, parish nurses, school nurses, hospice nurses, home health nurses. And now we're going to talk about the nurse as an occupational nurse. Okay, nurses play quite a big role in occupational health. Okay, so we're going to look at what the role of the occupational health nurse is. Describe the current trends in our workforce, right? And we're going to use that epidemiological model we just talked about with regards to work-related illnesses, injuries, and hazards. And then we're going to learn how to do an occupational health history, right? And then we're going to learn the two big agencies that oversee occupational health, and that's OSHA, and the other one is called, I call it NIOSH, but it's the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, NIOSH. And then do we have an effective disaster plan in case there is an emergency in the workplace? Okay. All right, so we know that no work site, work area, workplace is completely risk-free, right? And so we, as nurses, need to have a basic knowledge about workforce populations, hazards, methods to control hazards, how to improve health. So if you're working in a big plant, or you're working, in a hospital, or you're working, it doesn't matter where your work setting is. Occupational health needs to be looked at in every setting, right? Occupational health nurses have performed critical roles in planning and delivering worksite health and safety services. Again, a lot of what we do is education, but we're also into secondary and tertiary prevention as well. Right? So what is occupational health nursing? It's a specialty practice that focuses on the preventative healthcare, primary, health promotion, health secondary, health restoration, tertiary, within the context of a safe and healthy environment. Right? We try and prevent adverse health effects from occupational hazards or environmental hazards as well. Right? Typically, when we think of occupational health, we think about manufacturing, industry, service industry, healthcare facilities, construction sites, government settings, right? What is the scope of practice for an occupational health nurse? Right? We may be doing worker and workplace assessments and surveillance. Primary care, we may be doing case management, consulting, counseling, education, research, right? Lots of different hats we could wear as an occupational health nurse. Okay. Workers as a population aggregate. What is the characteristics of the workplace? We know that the workplace is changing rapidly. We know that the risks, occupational risks, are numerous, right? We know that there's been dramatic shifts in jobs, job responsibilities, scopes of practice. The workplace is rapidly changing, right? Injuries, illnesses, deaths associated with employment, all on the rise. Right? And so here's our epidemiological model presented in this chapter. Host, agent, environment. Let's review it again. What is the host? Any susceptible? Let's go to the agent first. In the middle, factors associated with illness or injury. Is it a biological agent, chemical, environmental, mechanical, physical? Psychosocial, what's the agent? What's the issue? And who's the host? Any susceptible human being, right? That are at risk of being exposed to any kind of occupational hazard. Right. And then obviously the environment. What's going on in the environment that's going to impact what happens? External conditions that influence the interaction of the host and the agent. Okay. So what are some organizational and public efforts to promote worker health and safety? Well, most places, at least every place I've worked at, has safety programs, occupational and safety programs, right? That may include the Occ health nurse, I call them, Occ health, physician, hygienist, safety professional, right? It may be education on the risks associated with, it may be evaluating your workstation and that you're not sitting all day or standing all day, right? So that's more the primary preventative, right? Education programs, health and safety programs. All right. So what do we do with the working populations? We'll need to do a worker assessment. Okay. So let's say you're working in a car manufacturing plant. Right. What's the history and physical assessment? What are they being exposed to? Right. Doing an occupational health history, their work history. Right. Teach them about workplace hazards and preventative measures. And then maybe do a workplace assessment, do a walkthrough. See what's going on. Do your windshield survey in the work setting. Healthy People 2020, they have a couple of objectives related to occupational health, right? They identify the national objectives aimed at reducing the risk of occupational illnesses and promoting safety. And then obviously the education, Healthy People 2020 is very focused on education. Health education and health protection strategies are proposed to address the needs of large population groups, such as the American workforce. And then slide 13 talks about your OSHA and your NEOSH. So those are important agencies to know about with regards to occupational health. OSHA is the federal agency that is responsible for improving worker health and safety, and they establish the standards and regulations by educating workers. And then the NEOSH is a branch of the U.S. Public Health Service that's responsible for investigating workplace illnesses, accidents, and hazards. Okay, and again, we have a right to know. The right to know standards in occupational health requires that all manufacturing firms to inventory their toxic agents, label them, develop information sheets, and educate the employees. What are those called in your workplace? Begins with an M. What are those called? MSD, MRSD sheets? What are those? They have them in every work setting. Has anybody ever seen these?
Yes. We
Yes.
have
Ours
them in a
are called
binder.
safety data sheets.
MS.
Safety data sheets. Thank you. That's what they are. Yes, that comes from OSHA. And if anybody's ever been involved in an OSHA visit, what's the first thing they do? They want to know where those safety data sheets are. And they go through those line by line by line. Right? Because in the workplace, you have to know what your risks are. Environmental risks, physical risks, psychosocial risks. Right? And then is there disaster planning and management in the workplace? Right? Is there an effective disaster plan? Right? That's been developed by those with knowledge of the workplace, the materials, the risks, the workers, the workplace, the resources in the community. Has everybody, all the key players been involved in this disaster planning? Right? What is the plan? Right? Specific steps must be detailed for actions to be put in place by specific individuals in the event of a disaster. Who currently works in a environment that doesn't have a disaster plan. You have to have a disaster plan now. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's look at chapter 32. Occupational health nursing. Okay, the PowerPoint is, again, a summary of what the chapter is, right? So what do we have to look at? What are the characteristics of the workforce? Characteristics of the work they do. Work health interactions. And they talk about the epidemiological model. Safety programs. How we do a worker assessment, workplace assessment. Healthy people. Okay, so our objectives are the same as the PowerPoint. Okay, highlighted a few terms here. Okay. Right, so we've already talked about this, but our occupational and environmental health nursing, which overlaps quite a bit actually, environmental health nursing and occupational health nursing, is a specialty practice that provides for and delivers health and safety programs and services to workers, worker populations, and community groups, right? Focuses on the workplace. We talked about workers as a population aggregate. So we know that Americans are employed in diverse industries that range from in size to tens of thousands of employees to a few employees, right? That could include traditional manufacturing, automotive, appliance factories, service industries, healthcare, restaurants, farms, construction sites, newer technology firms, right? And the updates and the characteristics of the workforce and characteristics of work, that's all changed. It's all evolving all the time, right? So we know that the US workplace and workforce is rapidly changing, right? Jobs in the economy continue to shift from manufacturing to service. Longer hours, new chemicals are being used. It's becoming more racially diverse. Okay. The demographic trends in the US workforce are leaning towards or indicating a changing population, right? Increasing number of women, older individuals, those with chronic illnesses are now part of the workforce or are part of the workforce. And because of changes in the economy, extension of, people living longer, legislation, working women, it's all changed. The whole perspective has changed. And then as far as characteristics of work, right? Over time, there's been a dramatic shift in the type of jobs held by workers. Right? We used to think of manufacturing society. Okay, everything's manufacturing, right? Service, professional technical positions, managers, computer specialists, service industry, healthcare, banking, insurance, clerical work, secretaries, right? But the change in the nature of the work has been accompanied by many new occupational hazards. And here's a few of them, right? Complex chemicals, nanotechnology, non-ergonomic workstations, job stress, burnout, exhaustion. Would y'all agree with that?
Definitely.
All right. Here's the triangle, right? Let's start with the agent. Agent, what's the issue? What's the workplace hazard? Is the hazard biological, chemical, ergonomic, physical, psychosocial? And who's the host? All susceptible workers and their families. And the environment, it depends. Factors that influence the environment. Are they physical factors? Are they social factors? Physical factors, is it too hot is there extensive heat in the environment you work on, or extensive cold? Is the noise levels? Those are physical. Okay. Okay, here it is right here. We need to review box 32.1. This is an excellent summary of work-related hazards. Excellent summary. Okay, the hazards, biological and infectious. And it goes through what that could be: a bacteria, virus, fungus, chemical, medications, solutions, gases, vapors, aerosols, enviromechanical, injuries, strains, discomfort. Are you lifting? Are you lifting the wrong way? Are you lifting more than you should? Slippery floors, workstation deficiencies. Important to know these 5. Physical hazards, what could those be? Extreme temperatures, noise that can cause tissue trauma. And then psychosocial hazards we talked about: stress, emotional strain, interpersonal problems. Okay, so highlight box 32.1. Really important to understanding the concept and the area of occupational health, of understanding what different categories present hazards. Okay, and again, this just goes through what's the host, what's I've already been through, is what's the agent, and what's the environment. Now, this is another good one to review. It gives you an idea, table 32.1 on page 565. It's certain job categories. Okay, so the first column is what the job is. The second column is what you're most likely to be exposed to. And then the third column is what are the potential work-related diseases and conditions that might come with your exposure. So let's review a couple of them, right? So let's go to agricultural workers. Exposures: pesticides, infectious agents, gases, sunlight. So what potential illnesses, diseases may present themselves down the road? Pesticide poisoning, farmer's lung, skin cancer. Automobile workers, what are their exposures? Asbestos, plastic, lead, solvents. What might that lead to? Oh gosh, sorry. So this is fascinating. Okay. Glass workers, what are they exposed to? Heat, solvents, metal powders, cataracts. So have a look at the different effects for job categories. Okay. And then it goes through what are some biological agents, what are chemical, what are environmental, physical. We talked about that. Temperature extremes, vibration, noise, radiation, laser, lightning, right? Physical agents, maybe a company, environments that use a lot of power tools, build trucks, right? You have to do an assessment for PPE. Are they using protective equipment? Do they have hearing protection for loud noises? Do they have eye guards? Do they have protective clothing? Okay. On-site, so this section is organizational and public efforts to promote worker health. We talked about the on-site occupation, occ health, safety, and health programs. Okay. And look at the different kinds of services that could be provided through an occupational health and safety program. Health and medical surveillance, health assessments, retirement, return to work after injuries, health promotion, health screening, right? Nurses play a pretty critical role in occupational health if you're working for a big company. Okay, let's go through levels of prevention for occupational health. What would be a good primary level? Well, how about provide education on safety in the workplace to prevent injury? And secondary, maybe we should screen for hearing loss resulting from high noise levels in a plant, right? And then tertiary, for the group of workers that has chronic diabetes, maybe work with the employees that have diabetes to ensure that they're caring for themselves appropriately, managing their blood sugar, managing their diabetes appropriately so they don't have so many missed work days. Okay. And then this how-to is an excellent, it's assessing the worker in the workplace. Right? And again, it's your nursing process. Obtaining a health history, conduct a health assessment, identify patterns of risk, see if you have to implement any safety classes, safety programs. Implement those safety programs after you have done a complete assessment of the workers and the workplace. Evaluate the work-related hazards, gather data. It's all part of your nursing process. Make sense? And then we have Healthy People 2020 related to occupational health. 7 of them. You can take a look at those on page 574. Right, it's work-related, decreasing work-related injuries, work-related illnesses, homicides, assaults. And then it goes through and talks about, here's your two, this is also a really good box 32.3. It gives you the differences of OSHA and NEOSH. Gives you what each of their functions are. Okay. And then disaster planning and management. We talked about that briefly. You can go back and read through that section. And it's basically making sure that you have, oops. Right. Although disaster planning and management have been functions of occupational health and safety, there's new legislation about disaster management all the time. Okay. I mean, every time we're doing disaster drills, there seems to be new information we have to implement. Right. And so the goal of disaster planning is to prevent or minimize injuries and deaths of workers, residents, minimize property damage, provide triage. Right. It requires cooperation of different personnel within the company and the community. Right. The nurse is often a key person on the disaster planning team. Right. And it talks about effective disaster plans. We went through this briefly, that you have to have people who know the work processes, know the materials, know the workspace, come up with a written plan, communicate to everybody who's doing what everybody's role is. Okay. Let's quickly look at our case study for Occ Health, and then we'll go to our attestation. Okay, so Rusty is an occupational nurse working in an industrial setting. He's providing health promotion and disease prevention to 500 workers in the automotive factory. Factory is responsible for applying multiple steps in the process of painting vehicles before they go to final assembly. Hazards related to this factory include exposures to chemicals and avoiding inhalation. There's also concerns related to physical agents such as noise. Rusty works to ensure that the employees are well educated about personal protective equipment and conditions to report to the nurse. Okay, so first question, what's the primary purpose of health promotion in the occupational setting? Primary purpose of health promotion, right? obviously to enhance the well-being of the individuals and the groups. Okay, we're not going to be able to eliminate the risk of disease. We're not going to be able to restore health as fully as possible. Okay, what's the primary purpose of promotion? Maintain well-being, the well-being of the individuals or the groups. So let's read this rationale. In the occupational health setting, the purpose of health promotion is to maintain or enhance the well-being of individuals or groups. Okay, this may include programs designed to enhance coping skills or good nutrition and knowledge about potential health hazards, both in and outside the workspace. Okay, health protection, taking primary prevention measures, is designed to eliminate or reduce the risk of disease to prevent the development of an illness or injury. All right, we know secondary occurs after the disease process has begun. It's aimed at early detection, prompt treatment, and prevention of further limitations. And then we know that tertiary is intended to restore health as best you can so that the individual can return to maximum level of functioning. So again, this rationale goes through primary, secondary, tertiary. Okay, so Mr. Anderson conducts a walkthrough on a weekly basis. Why? Why does he do that? Of course, the answer is A. Assess for any kind of hazards. He does a walkthrough. All right, none of the others apply. Okay, the nurse may conduct an assessment of the workplace itself. The purpose of the assessment, it's known as a work site walkthrough or a survey. Right? What is a work site walkthrough? Okay, and it gives you the 4 bullets of what they are. Right? What are the practices of the employees? Are there new hazards that you had that are new from the last week? What are you observing about the jobs people are doing? Are they lifting things properly? Do they have the right protection? And the last question is, the nurse is provided with a monthly data sheet about workers' comp claims and productivity. What's the purpose? Why should he have that information? Right? Well, B is the correct answer because it allows him to understand who's getting injured for what reasons and what the productivity is. Right? It allows the nurse to know about productivity and pinpoint potential stressors. Okay. Rationale. A description of the employee group is vital to understanding the demographics at the work and the work distribution in the company. Knowing about shift work and productivity can be helpful in pinpointing potential stressors. Okay, and you can read the rest of that. Okay, so these case studies are good this week. The rationales are excellent. Excellent. Whoops. Questions? So we tie together environmental health with occupational health, which go hand in hand with epidemiology. Can you pull it all together?
Yes.
A lot of information today. I know that. Okay, let's pull up your attestation. Remember, if you don't do it now, you have 24 hours to do it. So it needs to be done by tomorrow night. But if we could just get it done now, it's one less thing you need to think about. What's the first question?
What are the 3 elements of the epidemiological triangle?
Thanks, Ashley. And what are they, guys?
Agent, host, and environment.
Who said that? Jane?
Yes.
Collective thank you to Jane. I'm not going to make you write down what each one of them are. I think we went through them in depth today. Okay, what's the second question? Ashley, read it to us.
Within occupational health and the changes in the nature of the work, There have been many new occupational hazards identified. Please name 3.
Okay,
Would it be burnout, complex chemicals and exhaustion?
um,
Psychosocial hazards, chemical hazards, ergonomic hazards.
physical hazards. Right?
Hmm.
Think of all just think about it. Think about day to day. Think about all the environmental hazards and risks we're exposed to. And then think about your work environment. Think about the occupational hazards and risks you're exposed to. I mean, they're just too numerous to mention. It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, we typically don't think about these. A lot of times we just take it for granted. That everybody's making sure that everything's safe. But there are people that are actually responsible for those jobs. Okay. Questions. And then put down that we came to class today. And then for all of Dr. Lundy's students that came in a little bit late, if you could put your name and your campus in the chat, and I'll make sure she gets a copy of this, that'd be great. Appreciate it. Questions. A lot of information, but it's good information. It's part of community nursing. Just think of how vulnerable we are out in the community as community nurses. One day we could be the environmental nurse. The next day we're the occupational nurse. The next day we could be the school nurse, home health nurse doing the visits. So much to be involved with in the community. Any questions? So I encourage you in the next couple of days, while the information is fresh, to pull out your study guide and review this information that we learned today and compare it to what's in your study guide, and make sure you understand the information in your study guide. And if you don't, get to a review session and ask the questions. Okay. All right, that's all I have. I think, Brittany, you're going to stay on with me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then, oh, Siobhan, she'll come in. Okay, all right. Well, everybody have a good rest of the week.
Thank
I
you
have
so
one
much for your time
question,
today.
Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Good to see everybody.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Professor Marvel, I have one question. This is
Yes.
Jane.
Hi, Jane.
I was noticing that the case studies